Mike from Mike's Diabetes World. Today, we're going to do another story time. And this story, I think, is my life getting under control. I think that's my time, and people were counting on me, so that's what our story time is today. So let's get going, and we'll be right back. Okay, as I said in the intro, episode 5 is the story of me kind of waking up and really taking care of my own. 1988, I started to be a trainer with 7-Eleven. This was many years ago. And during my time, I got more and more training hours. I guess I figured I could do the job, so I started to get more training hours. I got into the office where I would be a full-time trainer. I wouldn't work in the stores anymore, but I'd be doing training. So I started, and I kind of really liked the training aspect. I had my whole system down, what to do in the class. I had my whole timing. So things were starting to look up for me. And I suddenly realized, no, before then, I went into the hospital again because my diabetes was out of control. I really wasn't taking care of myself. I'm sure everyone else probably knew it. I was probably too stupid to realize it. And I went into the office, or into the hospital, and one night, my immediate supervisor came in, not our training boss. I said, "Oh, have you come to fire me?" And the boss called me on the phone, his boss, and said, "No, you're not being fired." And that was it. He didn't say, "Oh, but you've got to start taking care of yourself." It was just sort of like, we're not, you know. But in my mind, I really enjoyed the training. So I started to say, well, when I get out of here, I'm going to do things right. I'm going to follow and do everything. I did that a number of times before, but it didn't work out. I had always come back to problems, and my blood sugars wouldn't work out because life got involved. Short time I'd be too busy at work. I'd work double shifts just so we could get students into classes so they could get to their store pretty quick. But this time, I think it was October. It was October 1st. And I made up this table on the computer at home, and I started writing down my blood sugars. I'd make it a point to do my blood sugars. I did that religiously. At first, it was, oh yes, I've got to have my meals at a certain time. I can only have this to eat. But that soon broke down, and I got my first high blood sugar. And instead of hiding it, I wrote that damn number down. And I highlighted it just so I could refer saying how often I'm going high, how often I'm going low. I remember orange started off as orange, and then pink were the colors for high, yellow was the colors for low, and then if there was no highlighted box, that meant my blood sugars were in the normal range. Well, I did that for one day. I was so proud of myself. And then it happened another day. And the next thing I knew, I had a week's worth of blood sugars. I had a doctor's appointment. I missed my hemoglobin A1C, but I had this week of blood sugars. She said, good. Or she said, sorry, good. Keep it up. Okay. Usually something like that is some sort of, I met the criteria, now I can relax and get out of it. For some reason, I didn't relax this time. Next morning, or that evening, sorry, I did blood sugar, wrote it down. Bedtime, did blood sugar, wrote it down. And I kept doing this. I did such a good job in recording it that when my doctor saw, my highlighted areas, and he suggested I go on to the predecessor of this pump. It would, I think, called the Vio. I was on an older pump, and I applied, or no, it was my first pump, sorry. And I applied, and I thought, yeah, the company's not gonna buy it for me. And it came back 100% approved. My first pump was bought by the company I worked for. They provided all my tubing. Sorry, that's my chain. All my tubing. It was there for you. There it is. It was all there. It was all covered. So I got the pump. I started wearing the pump. And things were looking good. I had a little hiccup in supply getting the pump supplies, so I went back to shots. But you know what I didn't do? I still wrote down my blood sugars every day. And I had about 14 pages of blood sugar. So it was over a year I'd been writing down these numbers, and it became habit for me. So I took my report in, and my doctor said, well, these numbers are getting way out of line. Are you still using the pump? And I told her about the problem getting tubing and everything. They were changing over. And she said, oh, well, we'll have to work on getting that for you. Your blood sugars were much better. But I kept still doing the blood sugars. If I missed one, I crossed it out, went right back to it. I'd never done this before. I would start until I had a hiccup or I forgot, and then that was the end of it. It was kind of like, oh well, things aren't going well. But this time I stuck to it. I started to have to do shots again, but I kept writing it down, highlighting it, go to the doctor. The doctor would suggest something, I'd write it down. I started to make a diabetic book. I had my blood sugars in it. It had all the information about how to count carbs, how to do certain things. It was an awesome book. My blood sugars were in there. I got a new pump. Now, this pump did not have the sensor. This was when I got the VO pump. And it partly came about because I showed up to diabetic, I call it daycare. It was diabetic training one-on-one in an office. I went there and I met up with the person, and she asked for my pump, or the receptionist asked for the pump so she could update it. And she looked at it and said, how am I supposed to update this? She called out my nurse, who has become my diabetic care nurse, and she said, oh, this is an oldie. You don't do this. So for a while there, it was what my blood sugar. I'd be writing down blood sugars and I'd go through photocopy them at work, and I'd write them out again. We then got into me being in the hospital for a year. And while I was in the hospital, they came every morning, did blood tests. I asked what my blood sugar was so I could write it down. I had missed a couple of days when I was really sick. But I showed up one day at Royal Columbian Hospital with the flu, sicker than a dog. The diabetic nurse said, well, you should go to emergency. I'll tell the doctor on call you're coming. Well, I was using a wheelchair. I got on my wheelchair, went down there, parked in the cubicle, got dressed in, the gown and everything. They hooked me up to the blood thing, and I missed that whole day. But you know what I did the next day? I started writing down my blood sugars again. But little story within the story. I was in DKA. I was so sick. They hooked up IV insulin, and there were a couple of interns that said, oh, okay, yeah. So they hooked me up, and I started to feel okay. My blood sugar started to trend downward. Not super low, but it started to trend downward. I wanted something to drink so bad. Even cold water felt good. So the nurse brought a cup of water. I drank that down and I wanted more. So she ended up bringing me a 1 liter kind of container, and I just sucked it. I drank it. I drank it back, and all of a sudden, oh, I don't feel so good. I don't feel so good, and I threw up all over the cubicle except missing my chair. And so I got my place, and the nurse came in and said, "Oh my, it was fluorescent green. It was bile because I hadn't really been eating much." So just let me there tighten it up a bit. Hopefully, it's my bad movie. But I was admitted, and the endocrinologist who admitted me, was a partner of my endocrinologist. So she came in and said, "We'll put you in for a couple of days." It ended up, I went in there in January, was let out in mid-September, and we fought and we got a sensor. But you know what I was doing the whole time? I kept writing down those numbers. And when the doctor would come see me, she wouldn't even have to read the chart. She would come and see, yes, I still highlighted lows and highs. And when it came time to upgrade a pump, we didn't have any problem whatsoever. So I started slow in writing down my numbers, and it just became an obsession. Now, I don't have to write down the numbers because it's always here. I can pull up charts from my iPad with numbers galore. So it took me a while to say, hey, I really have to control my diabetes. My dad, every time I'd see him, he'd take me out to lunch, and his talk was, "And so, how's the diabetes going?" And I'd say, "Oh, fine." And then I finally started saying, "Well, my blood sugar is this. Here, just before we eat, I have to do a blood sugar." And I kept doing this on and on. So for over 4 or 5 years, I did that. And after that year, 9 months of being in the hospital, I say the year just to stretch it out, we decided that I would need sensors for this unit. The only problem was the province didn't pay for sensors. So we applied, we got refused. When I say we, it was me, my diabetic nurse, it was the social worker on the ward. We all wrote these letters, and they all kept coming back, refused. And finally, one came back and said, "This is the final. if you think you're being done wrong, you can go towards a tribunal. Well, I said, okay. And they sent off the paperwork. And beginning of September, we had a tribunal. And I went with the two others, and the whole thing hinged on they were saying that the sensors were an accessory. And I said, oh no, accessory is a new little case, but a sensor is my lifeline. It is a glucometer in essence. And it was sent off. They decide. There was a representative from the social network place, or not the ministry, that's the word I was looking for. And we got word that we were approved. And it allowed me to get out of the hospital. I left with, I think they gave me 3 sensors, and I was allowed to leave, and just as I was sort of ending up those 3 sensors, my supply of sensors started to come in. It was great. And that's how I started to take control of my diabetes. Since then, I've done more. I'm now more active in discussing my lows with my diabetic nurse. I'm more open to trying new things. I think if I didn't meet up with Dr. Wallace, I would be in a lot more trouble now. I'd probably lose my eyesight, probably have lost my feet. But awesome, I thank her, and I thank Dr. Shu now. And pretty much any of the endocrinologists who work out of Royal Columbian, because they all know me. So this is at the end of story time today. That was a long one. Have a good day, and we'll talk later. Bye now. My email address is mikesdiabetesworld@gmail.com. All one line. Drop me